Hello, and welcome to Success with Audiobooks, what you need to know to get your book into audio. I'm Becky Parker Geist, and my business is Pro Audio Voices. I'm an audiobook producer and narrator, and I've been in the industry for about 36 years. As a brief introduction, so you know who you're listening to, I started in the audiobook industry in 1981. After receiving my MFA in acting from University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. One of my first jobs out of grad school was narrating talking books for the blind. This was a program that was run by Library of Congress, and I was employed at American Printing House for the Blind in Louisville, Kentucky. It was there that I fell in love with recording audiobooks and helping great stories come alive in this way. I am also the author of Audiobook Toolkit for Authors, How to Successfully Record Your Own Audiobook, which is now available at authortoolkits.com. So let's jump right in. As I say, I got started in 1981, and at that point, we were recording audiobooks on reel-to-reel tape recorders. So I've seen a lot of changes in the audiobook industry and the technology involved. Let's take a look at what's happening now. This is the most exciting time to be in audiobooks and getting your book into an audiobook format. The audiobook market is booming. For several years now, we've been experiencing double-digit growth year to year. And the year-to-year growth from 2015 to 2016 was an unprecedented 31% increase. And industry leaders are projecting that this year, 2017, will see a 40% increase. You may have noticed billboards and other advertising for Audible. Audible is a division of Amazon, and they are very aggressively marketing audiobooks. The global audiobook industry is currently evaluated at about $3.5 billion. The United States is currently the largest singular market with $1.8 billion in audio sales in 2016. So, as I say, we're seeing this huge growth. We're expecting 40% this coming year. So we're looking at about a $2.5 billion industry in 2017 in the United States alone. According to Publishers Weekly, in an article in January of this year, quote, "In some ways, the audiobook industry is becoming less and less rooted and connected to the overall book business. It is almost a separate thing, affected and driven by different trends, and engaging people outside of traditional book channels." End quote. So that's really exciting. It's a little bit like the audiobook industry has grown up. It has become a bit more independent, still connected to the regular print and ebook publishing industry, but it's developing its own personality and has its own distinct trends. Harper Audio reports that sales are sometimes stronger in the audiobook edition than the print or ebook editions. And that's happening more consistently now than ever before. Penguin has stated that they're going to be increasing audio titles for kids and young adults this year, which indicates that they are supporting the burgeoning audiobook market as kids grow up with audiobooks. Another interesting article in goodereader.com states that over the course of the past 3 years, the highest growing segment of publishing is audiobooks. Of course, an increasing number of audiobook listeners means there's a greater demand for great audiobooks to listen to. So let's take a look at some of the favorite ways for people to listen. About 73% of listeners are listening to digitally downloaded audiobooks, and usually on a phone. The trend is away from CDs, which probably is not surprising, although what might be surprising is that the CD market is still holding its own. Many older cars still have CD players, and a lot of listeners like to listen while they're in their car. Okay, let's take a look at genres. What are the most popular audiobook genres? Well, in 2016, the top genres were mystery, thriller, romance, and fantasy science fiction. Sales of nonfiction titles make up just under 23% of all reported audiobook sales for 2016. Now, some nonfiction books are not as easily converted into audio because of charts and tables and graphs and illustrations and photos and footnotes and things like that. But each of those visual elements can be used as an opportunity to drive traffic to your website. So if you have a nonfiction book with some of these more visual elements, I want you to consider that those might be creating opportunities rather than obstacles. We'll get into some of the cool things for nonfiction writers a little bit later. Okay, how do people decide what to listen to? There is a huge number of audiobook subscribers who are buying at least one audiobook every month. What do the studies tell us about how people decide what audiobooks they're going to choose? Certainly, some of this is going to be driven by the best-selling titles that Audible chooses to highlight on their website, and these are driven many times by the best-selling status of books in the print and e-book worlds. However, the studies show that word of mouth reigns supreme. Recommendations from friends and family remain a top motivator for buyers, and those are followed closely by reviews. So, what does that tell us? This one piece of information alone is invaluable because it drives home the importance of making sure your audiobook really sounds great. It also drives the point home that getting reviews for your audiobook should be a very high priority for you. We'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about marketing your audiobook. Let's take a look at what are some of the benefits of audiobooks. First, it's a different way of experiencing a book and the story you want to tell. Just as going to the theater to see a play is a very different experience than reading the script, your audiobook is enhanced by the performance of the actor. Also, over 23 million people in the U.S. are blind or vision impaired. These are people who need audiobooks in order to enjoy books at all. It's an opportunity to upsell and or cross-sell other editions of your book. So if your book is already in print and ebook, creating an audiobook creates an additional opportunity to sell your print and ebook editions. You can also earn more royalties from the same content you've already created. Audiobooks also help increase your book's discoverability. Consider this. If you're an audiobook listener and you're looking for your next book to listen to, even if the content you're looking for is in some print or ebook edition, you're not going to find it if you're looking for an audiobook. So having your book in an audiobook format increases the chance that your followers and or prospective fans will find it. You can also broaden your audience to audiobook listeners and engage your followers when they are too active to be reading. For example, if you're washing the dishes with your hands in water, this is not a good time to be reading a book, but it's a perfect time to be listening to an audiobook. When your followers and fans have their eyes or hands busy but their minds free, that's the perfect time to be engaging with them with your audiobook. All right, now that we've taken a look at what's going on in the audiobook world, let's get right down to what are your first steps in getting your book into this exciting world. First, just like with any other format of your book or any other business plan, step number 1 is to establish what your goals are for your audiobook. These fall into 4 basic categories: financial, audience, marketing, and career. Assuming you may be taking notes, I'm going to preface this section with the fact that you can find this list of audiobook goals on my website at proaudiovoices.com/goals. goals. So if you're a visual learner, as many people are, I invite you to download that list of goals from my website. This list includes the most typical audiobook goals, but you may have other ideas, and I encourage you to write down all of your goal ideas because they're going to help you in making decisions about your audiobook as you move forward. Let's first look at the financial goals. These could include generating more royalty income from your book content, increasing cross-sales of the same book in ebook and print editions, increasing sales of your other books if you have more than one published, selling from the back of the room if you do public speaking, increasing sales of products and or services on your website, and generating more public speaking gigs, if public speaking is something you'd like to do more of. Here are some audience goals. Broadening your audience to include audiobook listeners who will only find you if your book is where they are searching in audiobooks. Broadening your audience to include the blind and vision impaired. About 23.7 million people over age 18 in the U.S. alone report having vision loss. Adding an additional product offering for your fans. Making it possible for your followers to enjoy your book while driving, traveling, when their hands are busy and their minds are free. And enhancing the experience of your book by adding the layer of performance. This is one of my personal favorite reasons. Here are some goals that fall into the world of marketing. Increasing discoverability for your book in all its formats. Remember, the more distribution channels your books show up in, the easier your books are to find. Gaining a marketing tool for use on your website. Improving the chances of your website being found in online searches. Gaining audio clips to use in email marketing and or social media posts. Gaining audio to use in creating YouTube videos, thus leveraging the largest search engine currently in use. Some career goals could include enhancing your credibility as an expert in your field. The more folks that find the book you wrote that validates your expertise, the further your reputation reaches. Providing a product for back-of-the-room sales at presentations if you do public speaking. And generating more public speaking gigs. Again, you can find this list on my website at proaudiovoices.com/goals. Establish your goals to guide your decisions in the audiobook process, from the selection of your narrator to how and where you market the finished product. Let's talk a little bit about obstacles versus opportunities. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. What if your book has images, charts, and other visual elements? These kinds of books typically fall into two categories: kids' books and nonfiction books. Typically, children's books rely pretty heavily on the images. What an audiobook edition can offer that a print or ebook cannot offer are sound effects and music, which can be another way of enhancing the experience that images can't do. It's really just a different kind of enhancement. For nonfiction, texts that rely heavily on tables and graphs or photos, as I mentioned earlier, these can be used as opportunities to drive traffic to your website and your other text formats. These can be viewed, on one hand, as a marketing opportunity, but on the other hand, it's really providing added value for your listeners. When you provide those visual elements on your website, that's added value. But it's also an added benefit to you when they go to your website, because there they can learn more about what you do, who you are, what other books you may have to offer, or products or services, that's a greater opportunity for them to engage with you more fully. So if you are a nonfiction author, while it takes a little extra time and thought to prepare the manuscript for the narration, there are excellent opportunities to make those visual elements really work for you. Now, the typical first question that comes to mind when preparing to do an audiobook is, who will narrate my book? Here we have several options, so we're going to talk about each of these in turn. Many authors first consider narrating the book themselves. If that's something that you're interested in doing, I do strongly recommend that you get the Audiobook Toolkit for Authors from authortoolkits.com. There is a lot of very helpful information in there that I wish I had when I first started. It's like a shortcut, so you don't have to learn everything the hard way. Okay, briefly, some of the things you will need to do in order to narrate the audiobook yourself. First, you want to consider, do you have the ability to read in a consistently interesting, engaging manner over many hours? That may seem like an odd question, or maybe like an of course kind of answer comes to mind. After all, you wrote the story, you love it, you want to share it, you're enthusiastic about it. But you may be surprised at how difficult it can be to stay energized over a long period of time when you're not used to having to do that. Staying fully engaged with your story and the telling of it over several hours of recording can be difficult, even for authors reading their own material. Yes, you should love your own material, and you should love sharing it. But it's all too easy to let the voice gradually sort of tire out over time. So it is a legitimate question, and something worthy of your consideration. If you're planning to record in your own home or your own space, the top 4 things you need that may be the biggest hurdles for you are a quality microphone with a good sound, a quiet room, recording and editing software, and the know-how to use that software. If you want to record the book yourself, but record in a professional studio, the biggest hurdle there is going to be cost. All right, let's assume that you're not going to record it yourself and that you're going to hire a narrator. We're going to spend a little more time on this section. Nothing is more critical to the success of your audiobook than the selection of the narrator who will bring your story to life. Before we set out to look for a narrator, there are some decisions you'll need to make. The first is gender. Many authors will start out with the assumption that the gender of the narrator should be their own gender. They wrote it, it's their story, and therefore they would expect to hear it from someone of their gender. But really, there is a different set of criteria we should be looking at. First, is the book written in first person? If it is, that pretty much dictates what gender you should be looking for. If it's not, then is there a strong character perspective from which the book is written? If so, that could determine the gender. Think about from what kind of vocal personality your followers would most want to hear your content or story. With many books, you could go either way. Sometimes the gender of the protagonist may guide you in your decision. Or if you have a cast of characters that maybe leans more towards female, you might prefer a female narrator. Likewise, if you have a lot of men in the story, you might want to go with a male narrator. This has most to do with the dialogue sections of your book. The next area of consideration is age range. If the story is written in the first person, what is the age of that person at the point in time from which the story is being told? Does it change over the course of the book? What is the age of the protagonist? Does that age change significantly over the course of the book? And then think about what these factors indicate about the ideal age range that your narrator can portray. Now, again, I want to make sure that I'm clear on this. It's not how old your narrator is, but it's really the age range that they can vocally portray. Now, with nonfiction, most of those factors are completely irrelevant. However, you do want to consider who your target audience is, and you want to make sure you're getting the kind of voice that will best deliver your information to those willing ears. If your book is directed to high-level CEOs, for example, you want that voice to sound confident and like a leader. If, however, your book is targeted to seniors preparing for retirement, you may want someone with an older-sounding voice and who speaks slowly and clearly. The key here is to think about your target audience and make a conscious decision about how old your narrator sounds. The next factor you'll want to consider about your voice is if the characters have any accents or dialects that really have to be done accurately. If that's the case, then make sure that your audition passage includes the dialogue or narration that needs to have that accent so that you can make a clear assessment of that factor. As a general rule, accents are not critical to the success of an audiobook. What's far more critical is the acting quality. So often the vocal suggestion of an accent is enough, but that's going to depend on your book and how important it is in context. So, for example, if one character comments on another character's accent, you want to make sure that the narrator is able to do the accent that is being commented on well enough for that to make sense. Now, for nonfiction, some different rules apply. If you are a well-known expert in your field and you want to hire a professional narrator, then you may want to search for a voice that's similar to your own. While audiobook listeners will very quickly forget who is narrating in relation to who wrote the content, if your voice is well known, it will make it easier if you find a narrator who has a similar sounding voice to your own. So, that covers the criteria that you want to decide on before going to search for your narrator. The next thing you'll need to decide is how much to offer. Here we have a few common options. The most common ways of compensating a narrator include work for hire, or royalty share, or some combination of those two. With work for hire, you are basically agreeing to pay a designated amount of money for the work the narrator will do. Work for hire agreements are typically made on a per finished hour, PFH, or per finished minute, PFM, rate. What this means is that when your audiobook is completely finished and ready for uploading, its finished length is the basis for the amount to be paid. A typical range for per finished hour rates is between $200 to $400. The longer your book, the more work has to go into it, and thus the more you'd pay. If you consider that it takes the average professional narrator about 5 to 8 minutes to produce each single minute of finished audio, you'll understand that it's a time-consuming process, and it's only fair that the actor should be compensated for all that work. If you're wondering how long your finished book might turn out to be, you can use as a rough estimate 8,400 words per hour. With a royalty share option, essentially you are agreeing with the narrator to share both the risk and the rewards. The risk, of course, is what if the book doesn't sell well? Will the narrator get paid for all that hard work? The rewards are, if that audiobook sells well, the narrator wins just like the author wins. ACX allows you to do a royalty share with one of the narrators in their system, and they handle the royalty split so that half the royalties are paid to the narrator and half are paid to the rights holder. Assuming you can find a narrator you like who will do a royalty share with you, then you won't have to pay anything at the front end. All expenses will come out of your royalties at the back end. However, you should be aware that doing a royalty share agreement through ACX requires you to sign an exclusive contract with Audible and iTunes. That limits your distribution options, and so that's something that you should be aware of and consider when you make that decision. While a royalty share agreement might seem really attractive because it saves you front-end cost, one of the trickiest things about proceeding that way is finding a great narrator who's willing to take on the risk. Most high-quality narrators with experience are not willing to take on a straight royalty share agreement. The third option for compensation is a combination of royalty share and work for hire. This is often expressed as a royalty share agreement with an advance. So let's say you agree with a narrator that you will pay 40% of your royalties with a $1,000 advance on royalties. What that means is that you would pay $1,000 in advance royalties or a payment before the book is launched, but you won't pay anything additional to the narrator until your royalties have reached the rate at which that narrator would have received that $1,000. So if the narrator is on a 40% royalty scale and has received a $1,000 royalty advance, then you would start paying additional royalties at 40% after you had received $2,500 in royalties. Of course, how and when you pay that advance, either in full or in payments, is all negotiable with your narrator. The combination plan is actually a really strong one because it allows you access to narrators who are not willing to take on a royalty share agreement, but it eases that front-end cost for authors. If you hire an audiobook producer, that person is the one who's going to be negotiating those terms with you. The biggest challenge to the combination royalty share and work-for-hire agreement is record-keeping and reporting. So make sure that you figure out those details and have it written down so everyone understands what the agreement is. There's one more thing to do before searching for your narrator, and that is selecting a challenging passage for the audition. You'll only need a passage of about 700 to 1,000 words to determine whether you like the narrator's work. If your book is fiction, I would strongly suggest you pick a passage with lots of dialogue or other challenging elements like tricky emotional scenes. When dealing with lots of dialogue, the narrator will have to distinguish clearly between the different voices. If you have characters with accents or dialects, look for a passage that includes those so you'll know whether the narrator can handle it. For nonfiction, look for the most challenging content, a segment that may provide the biggest challenge for the narrator to make really comprehensible, even assuming you've written it very clearly. You may be wondering why I am suggesting you choose the most challenging passages. Well, the narrator that you select is going to have to do that most challenging section. Wouldn't it be nice to know at the front end whether that person can handle the material? And now that moment you've been waiting for, where to actually go look for your narrator. So, one of the first places I recommend is going to acx.com. The ACX system has about 20,000 narrators in their database. Now, that is way too many to try and listen to them all, obviously. But they do have a search tool that will allow you to narrow your search by many different search criteria. Now that you've made decisions based on all those criteria, you have a much narrower and clearer sense of who you're looking for. In the ACX system, first, you're going to register as an author. You are under no obligation to continue to produce your book through ACX, even though you sign up with a free author account and claim or grab your book from their online system. I make a point of saying you are not obligated to produce through ACX because I don't actually recommend that you do so. However, their system can be very useful in many ways, and this is one of them. So go ahead and register and claim your book. You'll be asked if you're planning to record it yourself, if you're going to hire a narrator, or if you're going to upload audio you already have. At this point, the simplest answer is you're going to hire a narrator. It doesn't really matter at this point what you say. You're just trying to get past this section to get to the narrator search section. On the upper right side of the website, you'll see that there is a button called Search. And when you roll over that, you have a choice for searching for a narrator. Go ahead and pull that up. Narrow your search using the criteria you already established. Listen to those samples and see if you can find some that you might like to ask to audition. It's valuable to go through the audition process within the ACX system, even if you end up not producing through their system. It will give you the opportunity to listen to many audition samples and get a feel for what that's like and how easy it is or hard it is for you to decide which voice is appealing to you. The other way to find narrators in the ACX system is to post an audition and wait in hopes of auditions coming in. If you do that, just make sure that you wait at least 2 or 3 weeks before making any decisions, because it takes time for narrators to find your audition that's been posted. Another way to search for a narrator is to go to Audio Publishers Association, or APA, at audiopub.org. APA is the professional organization for audiobook publishers, narrators, producers, technicians, and others in the audiobook industry. There are many member narrators, and just the fact that these narrators have taken their audiobook careers seriously enough to join APA speaks to their attitude of professionalism. A third option is hiring an audiobook producer. This is actually the easiest way to find a narrator, because what you're doing is you're hiring an audiobook producer who will do the search on your behalf and provide you with options. Companies such as my own, Pro Audio Voices, and Dayan Audio, for example, can help you find your narrator and save you from the search and vetting process, while still giving you the final say in narrator selection. One of the advantages here is that for those who are unfamiliar with how to determine whether a narrator can pull off a particular project, those who are experienced in the field have a much better sense of what a narrator can do and not do, and which narrators may be the perfect fit for your book. Another way to search for a narrator is just to do a general online search. Many narrators maintain their own websites these days, and so an online search may yield some possibilities. For any narrators that you find this way, be sure to find out what other titles they have recorded. Find those and listen to their retail samples, if not the full books. If there are reviews posted, be sure to read those. And I'm talking about reviews for the narrator specifically. It's really important to find a narrator that has audiobook experience. Now, I have in the past had a narrator tell me that he had narrated several audiobooks available on Audible. When I checked, however, I discovered that there were none. So when I asked him about that, he said that he had some that were pending. The point is, do your due diligence. Don't just believe whatever you read there. Go check it out. Besides, you want to find out if they have good reviews. And you may learn something just by listening to the retail samples. Speaking of retail samples, every audiobook retailer provides retail samples of the audiobooks they sell. So, you can go listen to lots of those samples, especially samples of books in your genre, and you may find one or more narrators that you'd like to have audition for your book. You can then search online to try to find that narrator, or ask a producer to do so. I want to touch on a couple other places that you could search for a narrator, but that I don't recommend because I don't think it's a very efficient process. One is voiceover database websites. These are sites that are devoted to matching voiceover talent with voiceover clients. VoiceOver, however, includes a very wide range of work, everything from radio commercials to animation for films. These sites thrive because so many people want to have a career in voiceover, and those people are willing to pay to be listed, and then they have their demo reel on these sites. And the reason I don't recommend this route is because you're going to be wading through so many people who have no experience in recording audiobooks, and it is a specific skill set. The quality of talent on these sites is very uneven, and so your search will likely be much harder and much less efficient. Another option that you could do is freelance websites. There has been a proliferation of sites where freelancers can connect with work opportunities. Some of these, such as Upwork.com, allow you to review the qualifications of those who have profiles, where they may promote themselves as voiceover talent. If you use one of these services, you are responsible for clarifying the terms of any agreement you make. And once you decide to hire someone, you have to put all the money you've agreed to pay into escrow, which will then be paid out according to established milestones. The key here, if you decide to take this approach, is to make sure that the narrator's experience includes audiobooks. And again, go check out retail samples to make sure, first of all, that you find them, and also that you think their work is a good match for your project. Let's go over how your goals that you identified early on in this process can help you in your narrator selection process. Let's say you've got a book about retirement, directed to folks in their mid-60s. You are also a retirement coach and have a website where you provide coaching packages, some affiliate products targeted to seniors, and links to the other formats of this book, as well as to another book you published. Perhaps you also do public speaking and would love a few more paid gigs. Your audiobook goals then might be to drive traffic to your website for coaching, which is a marketing goal, to generate more affiliate income through product sales by driving traffic to your website, which is a financial goal, to increase your market reach to seniors who are vision impaired, which is an audience goal, to sell more copies of your other book, a financial goal, to generate more public speaking gigs, both a financial and a career goal, and to demonstrate your expertise, a career goal. These goals would then help guide your narrator choice in several ways. For example, you may prefer a female narrator since women tend to live longer than men. You may prefer a senior voice, someone who sounds like a peer to your target market. A narrator with a slower reading pace, so they are easier to follow for those who may have some hearing loss, could also be a factor in helping you decide on a narrator. And a confident and compassionate sounding voice, a coaching kind of voice, giving a feeling of warmth, support, and caring. Think about what your audiobook goals are and how those goals might focus your search or impact your search and help you determine the selection of your narrator. All right, let's assume that we're at the point where you have identified one or more narrators that you might be interested in working with. What happens next? The first thing is, you want to make sure that the narrator understands the technical specifications required by the audiobook distributors. If they have audiobook experience, they should know what those technical specifications are. But it's best if you ask. The toughest standards are for Audible, so use those. Those are posted on ACX, and they're also in the Audiobook Toolkit for authors. The next step is to request the first 15 minutes of narration from your selected narrator. This first 15 minutes really helps establish that you and your narrator are on the same page, that the narrator is going in the direction that you intend. It's an opportunity for you to give direction for anything you want tweaked or adjusted, such as tone or the sound of the age of the narrator's voice, or really anything else. The idea here is to make sure you're getting off on the right foot. If you haven't already signed an agreement with your actor, this is the point at which you finalize that hiring process if you're really happy with their work. If you're not, don't. If you're moving forward, one of the things you can do at this point to really help your narrator succeed is to provide a list of pronunciations for any words or names you may have made up, or even names that can be pronounced multiple ways, but you have a preference as to which way they say it. For example, Andrea can also be Andrea, which can also be Andrea or Andrea. Lots of different options for the same spelling of a name. So make sure if your characters have names that could be pronounced multiple ways, and you have a preference, that you let your narrator know. This can save you both a lot of time and headache by getting this taken care of at the front end. Likewise, if there are vocal characteristics that you have in your mind that you would like the narrator to incorporate for any of the characters, let the narrator know at the front end so that they can incorporate that from the beginning. That's so much easier than finding it after they've already done the narration and asking them to go back and change those. That can be a very painful and frustrating experience. So spare yourself and your actor that kind of pain by making sure that you provide the right pronunciations at the front end. If the book is in chapters, the narrator will usually send you the chapters or sections as they are completed. I highly recommend that you listen as soon as possible to these chapters. So if there are any changes you want, they can be implemented immediately. For example, mispronunciations of any names or special words, character attitudes, the sound of a particular character's voice, etc. Listen to and proof all these audio files. It's your job to make sure that the narrator accurately tells your story, but not just accurately in terms of words, but really helps your story come alive. It is the narrator's job to make sure that that person delivers a word-perfect telling of your story while also bringing your story to life in all the ways that means. The differentiation of character voices, the emotions of the characters, appropriate phrasing and emphases in the sentences. All of these things come together to make a great storytelling and listening experience. Keep in mind that the process between you and the narrator is collaborative. Treat it as such. The actor is your partner in helping your story be the very best that it can be. As those recorded chapters come in and you listen to them, be sure to note any corrections that need to be made. Note the time in the audio so that you can reference both the page number and the time when you send your corrections to the narrator or producer. This is really, really helpful and will speed up your process overall. Once those corrections have been made, you'll want to listen again to make sure they sound great. Now, while the actor is busy narrating the book, you can be busy making sure that you have a cover image that meets the required specifications. That is, a 2400 pixel square JPEG. You'll need a copy of your book cover image that meets those specifications. And usually that means hiring a graphic artist who can modify your existing cover into a square version that also looks good and meets the required specifications. Okay, now let's assume you've gotten to the place where all of your audio is ready to go. Your narrator will have provided also opening credits, closing credits, and a retail sample. you get to select which 1 to 5 minutes of narration will be your retail sample. Let your narrator know where to start and stop the retail sample. Just keep in mind that the retailers require 1 to 5 minutes. You also want your retail sample to be some of the yummiest material, something that will grab the attention of your potential buyers and make them want more. Your files are ready. You've got your cover image ready to go. What's next? Now we're moving into the questions of distribution. You really only have 2 choices when it comes to distribution: ACX or Authors Republic. As I mentioned earlier, ACX is the production side of Audible, and if you distribute through ACX, you will only be distributing through Audible and iTunes. And although Audible dominates the audiobook market, it is not the only available retail channel open to you. If, however, you distribute through Authors Republic, you will still get into Audible and iTunes, and you will also be able to get into the other audiobook retail channels. The only potential advantages to going through ACX that I can see are if you want to use one of the ACX narrators and you're not able to work with them outside the ACX system, or if you want to go exclusive with ACX, which then would give you a slight increase in your royalty percentage. If you go through Authors Republic, your audiobook will be distributed through Audible and iTunes and other channels such as Barnes & Noble, Storytel in Scandinavia, Redo in India, Overdrive and Hoopla, which are both avenues that the libraries use, and many more. All of these channels open up for you if you go through Authors Republic. And Authors Republic retailers also pay higher royalties than the non-exclusive rate that ACX offers. So if you found a narrator on ACX and you want to do a straight royalty share, then that may be a better option for you. In most other cases, going with Authors Republic is more advantageous. In either case, you'll first set up a free author account and claim or grab your book title. In ACX, you'll have to decide between going exclusive or non-exclusive. Again, if you're considering selecting non-exclusive in the ACX system, you're better off going through Authors Republic. With Authors Republic, you do have the option to maintain a separate account, non-exclusive, through ACX. This does allow you to access your sales reports for your sales through Audible, but it also means you then have to log into both Authors Republic and ACX to view your sales from all channels. If that's the case, then make sure that when you're choosing your distributors in Authors Republic, check only the box indicating that you want them to distribute through all the other channels, not through Audible and iTunes. In either system, you will then set up your book profile. That includes your book description, your BISAC codes or category codes that your book fits into, the author bio, etc. One of the differences in the two systems is that ACX does not offer the opportunity for you to provide your own ISBN numbers. They don't use ISBNs on Audible because they use their own numbering system, the ASIN. So you don't get an option there to use your own ISBNs. In Authors Republic, you do have the option to provide your own ISBNs. You also have the option of accepting the free ISBNs that they offer. Controlling your own ISBNs means that in the metadata for your audiobook, you will be listed as the publisher rather than ACX or Authors Republic. That's a good thing in this world of everything data. That helps you in your visibility across the web. So I do encourage you, especially if you have more than one book published, to use your own ISBN numbers. If you've done that for your ebook and or print books, definitely take advantage of this opportunity with Authors Republic and use your own ISBNs. You'll need to provide two. In both systems, you'll need to provide a 2400 square pixel image as the cover for your audiobook. In Authors Republic, you may optionally also provide a rectangular image in a 3:4 aspect ratio. Some retailers prefer the rectangular image, but that is optional. The instructions and the specifications are all online on the Authors Republic site. You'll also need to upload the appropriate tax form, either a W-9 or a W-8 BEN, depending on whether or not you are a U.S. citizen. Moving on to retail price. In the ACX system, you have no control and no input as to the retail pricing. In the Authors Republic system, you get to name the retail price. You can state whatever retail price you feel is fair. You may want to use the ACX guidelines as a starting place to figure out what you'd like your retail price to be. When it comes to uploading your audio files, if you're using a narrator through the ACX system, the narrator will do the uploading, and then you'll be able to review after they've uploaded the files. In the Authors Republic system, you will either upload those audios yourself, or you can ask your narrator to do that if you give them access to your Authors Republic account. If you're working with an audiobook producer, the producer will usually handle this. Make sure that you also upload your opening credits, closing credits, and retail sample. Once you hit the final submit button, your audiobook is on its way to quality control and the retail sites. It usually takes about 3 days before it will show up on audiobooks.com, but it can take several weeks before it will show up on audible.com. So be patient and keep checking. Once you get to this place where you've submitted your audiobook, congratulate yourself, celebrate, and then start marketing if you haven't already. Ideally, you will have been marketing all through this process. There are many ways to market your audiobook, and you want to choose those that are best going to help you achieve your audiobook goals. If you have a website, that's a good place to start. Post your retail sample on your website. And if you blog, share about the experience. That's a great thing to be doing all along. Then you're not trying to sell, but you're sharing the experience and bringing your audience into the process with you. Then, when the audiobook is ready, they may be ready to buy. Likewise, on social media, you can use your retail sample, or if your narrator or producer will provide some extra clips for you, including some shorter ones specifically for this purpose, you can post those on social media and start generating some buzz. But it's more than just posting and asking people to buy. Ask questions and engage with people. Ideally, you already do this, so when your audiobook launches, they will be ready to hear about it. For example, if you have a nonfiction book, you could post a short clip that raises an interesting point or question and ask for feedback on the content. Use the clip as a tool to engage your audience, not just a signpost pointing to the buy sign for your audiobook. Consider this metaphor. If you keep using a hammer and people are seeing those nails going into the wood, then they're going to want to buy a hammer of their own. If you try to sell them a hammer, they're going to wonder why you think they need one. If you have a fiction book, you can post clips that connect your story to some news item, or that raise issues or feelings that your audience can respond to. Again, find ways to treat it like a tool for engaging with your audience. If you do that several times and start interacting with your followers, you'll find they'll be a lot more receptive when the audiobook launches to buy it. Another way to use your audio is on YouTube. You can actually create a very simple YouTube video by just using the cover image from your audiobook and the retail sample. The reason for doing that is simply to leverage the YouTube search engine. You want to be seen, or should I say heard, on as many appropriate platforms and in as many appropriate places as possible. If you've written a business book, you definitely want to be showing up on LinkedIn If you're appealing to moms, make sure you post your retail sample on Pinterest. You can also use your retail clips in email campaigns or in the signature of any email you send out. If your book would appeal to a specific professional organization, look for avenues and platforms that target those people and see how you can get involved and get your audio clip into those channels of communication. In Author Central and in Goodreads, make sure that your author profile includes your audiobook and includes the retail sample. Connect with your narrator on social media. If you used a producer, connect with your producer on social media. Find ways to build that web out and include your audiobook in all your communications. Just as with each of the other editions of your book, you'll have the greatest success through targeted marketing actions. Once your book actually launches in Audible, you'll get 25 free download codes. Those become a tool for you to get reviews for your audiobook. Use them for that purpose. Remember when we talked earlier on about the main driving force that gets people to buy an audiobook? Word of mouth and reviews. Make that extra effort to reach out to people that you know, that you think will actually follow through and do the review, and then give them a free download code. Make sure that you make a note who you gave it to and when you gave it to them so that you can follow up and ask if they've had a chance to listen to your audiobook and write the review. Let them know that you're really counting on them to follow through. Whether their review is 5-star or not, it's okay. It's more valuable to have some review than no review. Social media, local networking, a website that is working for you with targeted metadata, being guided by your audiobook goals, and keeping a laser focus on the center of your target are all keys to your audiobook success. I'd like to thank you for being with me today, and I'd also like to thank Orna Ross and the Alliance of Independent Authors for the opportunity to share this information and time with you. If you would like more in-depth info on how to prepare your book for being narrated, marketing your audiobook, launching your audiobook, the question of whether to get CD sets made, and more, check out Audiobook Toolkit for Authors, How to Successfully Record Your Own Audiobook, now at a promotional discount at authortoolkits.com. I hope I've made a difference in helping your great stories come alive.